Yeah, let's do the official intro, right? Travis Snider, professional baseball player playing for the Gwinnett or the Stripers,
Stripers, yes.
the Gwinnett Stripers, in the Atlanta Braves organization, AAA, longtime big leaguer. Glad to have you on riding the bus.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you
Thank-
guys for having me.
Thanks for joining the bus. We've shared an actual bus together, and
Yes,
now
we
we're
have.
sharing a metaphorical bus.
I've been dreaming of this day
Right.
since I listened to your guys' first episode.
Seems so long ago.
Yeah, I think I'll try not to speak too much for you, Travis, but I believe you were one of the first people who were just like, God, these guys can just get a podcast or something so that so I don't have to hear this every day in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I mean, this is a culmination of the summer of 2018 with the old Long Island Ducks and listening to you guys talk about all the things NBA that I could care less about since they stole the Sonics from us. And Bennett, he's not opinionated at all, and you don't like to ruffle his feathers, so it wasn't entertaining for us in the clubhouse. And I'm sure this podcast hasn't been very fun for you guys either.
No. I mean, you're acting like you never joined in on those conversations, which I don't know if that's accurate. Maybe not the basketball ones. Maybe not the basketball ones, but you like to give your opinion. I remember one time I don't know if it was me and David talking, but somehow I was talking to somebody about football, and the Seattle Seahawks came up, and you jumped right into there to give your opinion. So,
are either of you guys 49ers fan?
Yes, I am.
I mean, naturally, we're going to bring up the fact that I was at the NFC Championship game when Sherman ripped the ball out of your guys' heart. And,
yeah.
All the punishment you guys have had to take here for the last 10 years. You did sneak a couple of wins in, I think, 2 years ago. But yeah,
I've been okay. I'm not a part of the team.
NFL or fantasy football, I mean, that's I've been known to be opinionated on those things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking of guys that don't like to ruffle feathers,
never do. I just
never really stirring the pot.
Just walk around with my smile on my face, and people just assume I have something to say all the time. I don't know why.
So you don't like basketball at all? Like you don't watch basketball at all?
I grew up a huge Sonic fan. Used to follow it in the paper, read the box scores, standings. I was all in. And then when they took the Sonics and moved them to Oklahoma City, it was really tough for me to get behind rooting for any team other than the Sonics, let alone the Thunder, who became a pretty solid organization for 10. I don't even know how they're doing now because I don't care about the NBA. But I am hopeful that soon we will get a NBA team back in Seattle. We got an NHL team coming, so I'm fired up about that. Even though I'm not a huge hockey guy, just having a local sports team is what I'm all about.
Mm. So if they brought a team back to Seattle, then you'd kind of get back into it. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think as I've gotten older, going and watching NBA games live, I think is one of my favorite sports to watch because just the amount of athleticism that those enormous human beings have. You guys can relate because you're over 6 feet. I'm not quite there. So for me, it's watching the big bodies move around the court like they're, 5'10", 235 pounds. It's like watching me out there in the outfield.
Yeah. It's funny because you brought up hockey. I would say that I'm not a big hockey fan, but the few times I've been to hockey games and like to seeing it live, I think it's one of the, I'm trying to think how to say it, like I don't want to say one of my favorite, but one of the better sports to watch live. That like I don't even really enjoy the sport that much, but the environment of a hockey game I feel like is a lot of fun to be around. And as someone that played in Toronto, someone that played in Canada, I'm sure you've been around, because the game I went to was in Vancouver, one of the games I went, and just how passionate Canadians are about their hockey.
Yeah, I mean, getting to go to Leafs games, I kind of learned the sport of hockey in spring training, going to Lightning games, which is always a nice, evening event for us. And actually, my financial advisor took me to a game and like really broke down how the strategy and the rules and things worked. Because not growing up playing or watching hockey, I didn't have too much of an idea. But once I learned how things worked, and then you realize how fast those guys are going on skates. I agree with you. That and the NBA are two of my favorite sports to watch live that I very rarely watch on TV.
Interesting. I wonder if that's because both of those sports, now I think about seeing live, there's really not like a bad seat. in the house. Like,
Yeah,
because you go to a football
smaller
game
arenas.
live, like you can sit places where it's like I can't even really see like what's going on. I don't know. I think there's something about basketball, and same with baseball. Like if you're super high up, or some people don't like sitting out behind the fence. But basketball and hockey, I feel like everywhere you sit is kind of a good seat. So maybe that has something to do with it.
It's also fast paced too,
Yep.
right?
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're also more constant motion than say baseball or football.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, soccer is constant, but it can lull. But I mean, I don't know. I've never been to a soccer game in Europe. I've heard those are amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
I feel like the field in soccer is so big though that even though the action is constant, like when the ball is close to the goal, it's exciting to watch. But when it's just a bunch of passing midfield, like I don't know. I don't get behind it that much.
You guys been following the Euros? The soccer tournament going on? No, you guys don't like soccer?
Nope. No.
I honestly like it, but not enough to jump through the hoops to figure out a way to watch it and figure out which teams I
It's
like.
on ESPN, the app. So
Big hoops jump.
I didn't say they were impossible hoops to jump through. I just said I haven't jumped through them.
it's one huge size hoop.
Click on the app.
No,
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
I'm getting there.
Soccer's out.
All right.
Well, so I guess one thing I wanted to talk about with you was kind of how the lifestyle in the minor leagues has been this year. I assume it's wildly different than last time. Last time was 2019.
Yes.
Was you were with the Diamondbacks in Reno, if that's right.
Yep.
Just if you could kind of talk us through like some of the changes this year.
Well, I'll go back to 2020. I actually, I snuck in to the alt site with the Marlins for about 6 weeks.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, right when, at the time, Matt Joyce was out with COVID. They wanted another left-handed bat, and by the third or fourth day that I got there, that's when 10 or 15 guys on their team got COVID. So the experience of going to the alt site was one I'll never forget, because the first time around it was such an unknown for all the players, the coaches, and once I got there, we had about 3 or 4 days, and then we started getting shut down almost every other day because another guy would test positive, and the team just broke from the exhibition games in Atlanta. So it was it was a very stressful time, I think, for everybody involved, because it wasn't as clear-cut as spring training, what you could do, what you couldn't do, as far as protocols, and everybody's still trying to figure out what is this virus, how do we get it, So it was a weird experience, I think, playing in front of no fans in, ultimately what's an inter-squad scenario, day in and day out. It was a good experience because I got to face some of the young arms there, Sixto Sanchez, Rogers, the big lefty who throws absolute fuel, and got to be around an interesting mix of very young prospects that they wanted to keep there to continue their development, and then seeing some of the older guys like myself kind of mixed into the group made for a new and kind of an exciting experience, but we also had to find ways to make it interesting. And as you guys know, I don't talk a lot of shit, and I don't show up to the field with a lot of energy. So I was that guy that was, just poking and prodding at everybody every day, like, I'm going to take you deep, and, I might strike out 3 times, but I'm talking shit the next day. And I think overall there was a sense of unity. I can only speak for the Marlins camp, but everybody was kind of in it together. Most guys were away from their families, locked in a hotel room, weren't really sure if we could go outside and, even go for a walk, right? At that time, it was still so new. So that experience was one I'll never forget. And then going to the alt site this year was a little bit better version of that, I think, with the vaccines and the progress that we were making as an organization of getting guys vaccinated. However you feel about that. The whole idea was to get 85%. And we just hit that number a couple of weeks ago, so a lot of our protocols have been relaxed, which has been very nice. But throughout the alt site and the beginning of the season, it was different, man. Just wearing masks in general. I know all humans, whether you're an athlete or not, just wearing a mask everywhere became kind of normal. As much as some people don't like it, I wasn't a huge fan of wearing a mask, but that's part of what we had to do. And then getting into the actual game scenarios where we ended up having fans kind of like the last weekend of the alt site right before we broke for the season, and it was like a new feeling, after a year and a half, 2 years of not seeing people in the stands. Like, I remember we took an infield that day, and we have one of the best infields, I think, in baseball, let alone the minor leagues. And watching these guys I've been playing a little bit of first base, so I'm just standing over catching these balls and I'm watching these guys do it. But the first day we had fans in there, we made like 3 or 4 errors in infield that you just normally wouldn't see, right? And everybody's kind of looking around like there's a different buzz here. And then we ended up opening up in Charlotte, which I don't remember if they're at full capacity yet. But just getting back into the arena with fans, the energy, the buzz, I think it was a nice kind of full circle for all of us. And like I said, once we hit that 85%, it was nice to be able to kind of relax. Those of us that are vaccinated could, get the mask off and just focus on playing baseball and not having to walk on eggshells everywhere we went.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, I remember that. We had. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say.
Well, no, I was gonna say they. Go ahead.
Well, if you were gonna say, because I was gonna ask him a question based on what he said, but if you had something to say, then you should go.
Yeah, there's been enough back and forth. I think we should just move on to the next.
Well,
question.
I was just going to ask him because he was talking about the vaccines and wearing a mask, and obviously through a tough time. I know he's a football guy, and I saw this story that's been going on with Cole Beasley in Buffalo, where he's talking about how he's kind of against the vaccine and whatnot. He's getting a lot of backlash for it, and I was just going to ask what your experiences, Travis, were. When you're talking about being at the site during COVID, and now how people, when those kind of disagreements come up in the clubhouse, how it's handled. I've always kind of been intrigued by that in the clubhouse because people have disagreements, people come from different backgrounds, and kind of how that was handled of the guys that got the vaccine and the guys that didn't get the vaccine and the guys that want to wear masks and the guys that are anti-mask, and how that was that a big part of it, or was that a problem, or stuff like that?
There was no poking or prodding or debating or arguing, if you could imagine. No, I'm kidding. I personally myself.
I was going to believe you.
No, I know that's the poker face, right? But I think, like any debate in any clubhouse, you can politicize it. You can go, religion. You can go politics. You can go a number of different routes with it, science-based, whatever your feelings are. And I think if you were to poll all 30 guys in every clubhouse, you're going to get a lot of mixed answers based off of a number of reasons. But I think ultimately what a portion of us I know that decided to get vaccinated, if I wasn't playing baseball, I can't say that I would have gotten the vaccine. And that's just my own personal beliefs and my immune system and what we're dealing with. But I also don't want to be insensitive to the people that are higher risk, are older, that are dealing with health issues. And, even some of the younger guys that have had a tough go with it. But I think ultimately we'll recognize that, number one, nobody in baseball, right, that we know has passed away from COVID. So that's step one. And then step two is, okay, how many guys had some really bad experiences with it? And I can't speak for any of the guys that were with the Marlins, but listening to some of the stories, when they were locked in the hotel in Philly, when most of those guys tested positive and being stuck in a hotel. And I think people outside of baseball wanted to point, or even inside of baseball, wanted to point the finger at who went out, who, did something they weren't supposed to do. And you realize it's not always the people that go out with the wrong intentions or do something to break a protocol that end up getting the virus. So when it's all said and done, we all, as a group, had to make a decision individually if we wanted to get vaccinated. And I think, the NFL, you've seen some of the releases on what the protocols are for vaccinated and unvaccinated players. And I think ultimately for me, to be able to have my family there, to be able to have a more freedom on the road once we hit the 85%, to be able to go out to breakfast and do normal daily life stuff. It was kind of, the pros outweighed the cons at that point for me. And I think that a number of guys felt similar to me. They weren't just like, hey, yeah, let's get the vaccine because we really want to get vaccinated. It was like, hey, this is what we got to do to be able to function in our work environment without being locked in our hotel room. Because that was honestly a really difficult experience for me, being away from my family and not being able to thrive on the camaraderie of going out for dinner or going out for breakfast. Washu and I used to go out to breakfast all the time. And just having that social aspect outside of just going to the field, hitting, pitching, playing a game and then coming home and being like, all right, what do I do now for the next 8 hours? So I think it ultimately there was guys that got it that didn't want to get it. I think there's guys that wanted to get it the whole time that got it, and there's definitely a handful of guys in every team that have stood their ground and said, hey, we don't want to get it. And I personally believe it should be your choice, and it shouldn't be something that starts a debate, publicly with people backlashing on a guy like Cole Beasley who doesn't want to get it. I mean, the guy's a professional athlete. He takes care of his body. He's probably in tune with his health. He's done his research, whether his research is accurate or not. Like, we're all ultimately human beings and should be able to make a choice. And again, being able to go out and do the things that I can do now because I made that choice to get it, I'm happy that I made the choice and didn't expend too much energy trying to fight it or find reasons not to do it, which I tip my cap to the guys that have made that decision and stood strong with it. But, ultimately I try and support my teammates no matter what they decide.
I like that.
Bennett's made this point a few times where it's like team kind of has a way of bringing, non-like-minded individuals together. And in this case for the goal of, kind of bringing the experience back to a sense of normalcy. But I don't know, I always find it interesting when stuff like that happens, the way guys like make those decisions just based on like, how can we make this situation better for the group? Who has to sacrifice what? And that whole thing.
Yeah. And I think when you make somebody else's personal choice about you, it becomes a selfish thing for me where, again, I know guys that have chosen not to get vaccinated, and I still look at them the same as guys that chose to get vaccinated. It was nice that we hit that 85%, like most organizations have now, so that we can continue to move forward, and the guys that haven't have to follow a little bit different guidelines. But at the end of the day, knock on wood, we're hopefully getting out of this stage of the world that we've been in and transitioning back to a somewhat normal life, and we can all move forward and look back on this in 5 years and say, man, that was a crazy deal, but we're in a better place because of it.
Yeah, I wonder how much different it sounds like it would be if, one or two guys were the reason why you weren't over 85%, and if there would be like more pressure then on those guys to do it.
I don't think the pressure comes from the players, and I know most organizations don't want to put the pressure on players to make that choice. But again, when you read the protocols and you look at the difference, pre and post, 85% vaccinated, non-vaccinated, it's, again, everybody's choice to make. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with the choice I made. I did experience some side effects that were not what I wanted to experience, but again, it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle or overcome. I was just really interested, and I think it's not something that was talked about very much, how many injuries early on in the season took place. And you can say, yeah, well, some guys didn't play last year, some guys only played 60 games, some guys only went to an alt site, and I think all that has a place in this conversation. But ultimately what I experienced and what I saw my teammates experience, the side effects and just some of the lingering effects for days and even weeks. We had guys that just were weak and tired, and I think that if I were in a position, right, to say, hey guys, we're going to get vaccinated, but we have to be very careful about our workload, right? Because when you put a vaccine in your body, right, you're taxing your immune system, which ultimately is going to help you recover or not recover. And I think looking back on it, there wasn't as much communication, or maybe just because we hadn't been through something like this, medical staffs, trainers, doctors. I think it was something that kind of went unnoticed, or maybe not. I can only speak for the experience that I've had, but I definitely noticed that I needed to scale back on, stuff that I was doing in the weight room, stuff that I was doing, pre and post game, to make sure that I wasn't taxing my body to a place where I was going to blow out, oblique, hamstring, etc., just because my body was not in a place where I felt like I could get my full day's work in for 7 to 10 days after the vaccine. I had to just scale it back based off of what my body was telling me and what kind of sleep and recovery I was getting, which it definitely wasn't the same for the first couple of days.
It's interesting.
Yeah. That's a good point. I never even thought about that.
Travis,
Yeah,
did you ever get COVID?
I never got COVID, and I was a guy that, I was flying in May of 2020, and we traveled a handful of times, throughout that summer, going to Florida to play with the Marlins, et cetera, et cetera. I got, several tests done. And again, it was something where, my family and I made the choice where we were going to follow the rules, but we were also not going to live in a place of fear based off of what I felt was, the information that was provided to me and the research that I had done. And it was kind of crazy because I was in Arizona when everything hit, and Arizona's more of a Republican state. So I don't know if you guys have gotten out and traveled much, but it's state to state, it's completely different. And being in AZ, when everything shut down, everything was slower to close, more things were still open. Luckily, golf courses were still open, so I was getting out and doing that. But there was just more access to things that when I flew home to Washington for Memorial Day weekend, and then ultimately we moved back in June, it was almost going back a stage or two, which you guys being in California, I'm sure was more like the Washington experience, where you would go to a place like Arizona, or even when I got to Florida, we couldn't go out and do anything, but you would ride around or walk around outside, and you would see people out eating at restaurants and doing things that were like people in Washington would have freaked out because of the way things were set up.
Yeah, coming out to Milwaukee last year, we had the COVID season. It was like 60 games, and it was so much more relaxed here than San Diego. It was like real like culture shock going back and forth.
Yeah,
Just coming in going into a random restaurant, and there's just a bunch of people in there, no mask, no anything. And then getting used to that, and then going back home where it was very much, strictly enforced and strictly followed.
Yeah.
And
I think that leads I think that leads into kind of what Bennett was saying earlier, is you get a bunch of non-like-minded people, right, from different states and different childhoods, different political beliefs, religious beliefs, just overall view on the world. And I think that's something I'll always appreciate about my experience in baseball, is getting a chance to be around people that don't think the same way as me, because it challenges somebody like me who can be strong and opinionated with my personality at times. It's given me a different perspective, when you look at some of the craziness that we've experienced in our lifetime and really the last couple of years. Just understanding that, if somebody was raised in Georgia versus raised in Washington or San Diego, like there's going to be differences. Not that everybody in Georgia is the same, not that everybody in California and Washington are the same, but you meet people that are very one way. And I've tried over the course of my career to be more open to understanding why people think the way they do, and what type of experiences in their lives have led them to this point to believe and say what they do. But at the end of the day, that's life anyways, right? Anywhere you go, you're going to meet different people. But I think when you get state to state in a time like this, it was definitely interesting to see the difference and what's going on and how people are handling it.
Well, it's funny because I can't speak for David, but one of the reasons, my thought process behind riding the bus and the podcast is that, like, one of my favorite things of the clubhouse experience and playing was that you have so many conversations and around so many people that kind of feel differently than you. And I think one of the problems we have in our society today in general is that not enough people, interact with people that feel differently than them. And so they stay in their bubble, and then they go, I can't believe, how somebody could think this, or, they can't even fathom the other side of like the argument, where I go, as an athlete, you're in these clubhouses from these people all over the place. It's like, yeah, whether I disagree with him or not, like, yeah, I see where he's coming from. Or I see this guy. He's not a bad guy. He's not this malicious, terrible person. We grew up a little bit differently, and so therefore we see the world a little bit differently. But, great teammate, love the guy, good friend of mine. I have many friends that almost I feel like on everything we probably disagree on, but I'm like, love the guy. Great guy, great teammate. You ever need anything, call me up, and we're there. And it was funny when that whole, like, shut up and dribble thing was going on with like LeBron and KD. My whole point was like, who better to talk about I feel like social issues and as like than athletes, like talking about athletes that are in clubhouses that are constantly around people that you have to, especially baseball players. I feel like it's probably the most diverse clubhouse, I would guess, as baseball players. You're not only from interacting with people from different parts of the country, but different parts of the world. That I always think that gave an interesting perspective. That was kind of one of the main reasons I wanted to start a podcast and talk with people from all over, because I always was fascinated by that. So I don't know, I just always kind of found that to be interesting, and it was always one of my favorite parts about being in clubhouses.
Yeah, I think COVID too, to your guys' question earlier, there was a limit, right, on that social interaction even when you're out the field, because there were protocols in place and things you couldn't do. So, hanging out after the game and having a beer in the clubhouse was like a non-starter, right? So as we progressed and been able to spend some more time around each other without having to get to point A to point B to point C and then go home, I think it's allowed all of us to kind of settle back into that connection that you're referring to, that is a big reason why I still play the game today. And we have a pretty cool group here in Gwinnett, from our coaching staff on down to, the youngest guys on this roster. We have a number of major league veterans, and then we have a number of young prospects. And I think for us, as we've been able to transition back into a little bit more normal, not completely normal, but environment where we can sit down and have these conversations before the game, after the game, without having to have, masked on all the time and doing all the things that we had to do early on. It's definitely been a nice change of pace. And when you didn't have that, it didn't feel the same, right? You're getting out of there as quick as you can. You're showing up. You can't show up early, which I know both of you guys were early to the clubhouse, spend time in there, get your work done, but be able to socialize and make the most of those social connections. So I think it's been a nice change of pace, getting back to a little bit more normal lifestyle and being able to have those conversations, like you said, even when you don't agree on things, but being able to sit there and hash it out in the clubhouse and walk out of there and be like, yeah, I can't wait to go, back to the field tomorrow and be around the boys and get after it.
Right.
I wanted to, oh, my bad. Just real quick, I wanted to go back and ask, being somebody that can't really not speak their mind if they wanted to, do you feel like that's kind of accelerated like your, I don't want to say like maturation process, but like the process of being open-minded and like understanding different people from different backgrounds? Like, do you feel like the fact that you're more willing to put your perspective out there kind of leads to you learning more from people? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm more of a social personality in the clubhouse, I'll talk to everybody from, the assistant clubby to the video guy. And, I've found throughout my career at every level and every stop, whether it's indie ball, the big leagues, or the minor leagues, there's just good human beings everywhere. And not that everybody's a great teammate and everybody's a great human, but being able to interact and, yes, share my opinions more often than most people and say the things some people think that don't want to say is kind of my reputation. Mm-hmm. But as I've gotten older, I've also learned that there is a culture, right, in the clubhouse, and it's easy when you're an older guy and you're a veteran guy to just say this is the way, and instead of like, hey, just because somebody told me this was the way when I was the young guy, now I'm in this position to be able to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the best way to do it, or maybe I do need to listen to the 23-year-old actually talk, because there is something I could learn from him or something I could relate to back when I was 23, 24 that now at 32, 33 wouldn't even cross my mind. So there's definitely more of a balance for me as I've gotten older, trying to take less off being just the clubhouse policeman that wears everybody out, right? Because that's an easy thing for me to fall into with my personality type, but something I've become more aware of. And understanding, too, that there has to be a place where people can have a conversation, whether it's one-on-one or in a group discussion, if they have a valid point or something that you need to change the lens and look through a different perspective, great. But if you're going to come at me with some weak argument, I'm still going to let you know I don't agree with you and run circles around you until you figure out that you're wrong.
Yeah, no, I love that, the idea of like listening to valid points from, people, the younger generation of players with, that may have valid points that you haven't thought of. I think that's an excellent point.
Well, even veteran guys that had different experiences coming through the minor leagues, and whether you're a first round pick or a 20th round pick or anywhere between or after, right? Everybody's got different storylines. Everybody's got a different experience of growing up playing the league, summer ball, college, JUCO, high school pick. And I definitely see trends, right, with high school guys, which I was, versus college guys, and I think that, again, the region or the state you grow up in, the way you're raised, the way your parents were raised, right? It's the same thing for veteran guys now that had veteran guys 10, 15 years ago. There's this level of this is the way things should be, and I think as a whole, baseball is trending in a good direction compared to where it was 10, 15 years ago, where if you were a young guy, you weren't even allowed to talk, right? And at this point now,
right.
It's opened the floor for guys to understand that, when I was 22 or 23 or even at 33, there's things that I struggle with still, right, that I've learned time and time over in my career, and just being able to sit down and talk to somebody who's been through that or is going through that or is just even willing to talk about it. I think that the game is trending in the right direction as far as kind of opening the floor for those conversations to be had and more progress to be made instead of just saying, oh, we're going to do things the way we've always done it.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
I wanted to ask, after spending, because you spent a decent amount of time in the big leagues, like what that experience was like going from that to then your first experience going to indie ball. Because my understanding is that Long Island was your first indie ball experience, right?
That was, yeah.
Right. So that is so us all obviously being a part of that, like, because I remember, to be honest, when I saw the roster, Travis Snider, I was like, I've watched Travis Snider play for a long time. I feel like I'm like, that's pretty cool, And like for me, someone, it was kind of cool. Like whenever they would sign a big leaguer that I like watched play, I was like, that's cool. I get to play with that person now. So I was just kind of wondering what that experience like, because you're not happy to play with Ben and Perry, right? Like you hear Ben and Perry's on the roster, and that doesn't do anything for you. So kind of what that experience like is going to indie ball.
I think so much of it comes down to ego, which I have a big ego, and I have to continually check that ego as the season goes on, because it's easy to fall into, oh, well, I was a big leaguer, and I've got this much service time, and I made this much money, and it's like, for me, the transition mentally the first couple of weeks was difficult, and I wanted to approach that experience similar to the way I approached going back to AAA after being in the big leagues for a long time. Is there's always something you can complain about if you've seen how good it can be. But at the same time, if you're always complaining about things that are different, you're not going to take care of what you need to take care of where you're at. And 2016 in AAA was kind of a catalyst year for me of figuring out if I was going to be able to continue to play the game and get the opportunity to play. And that set me up for a much better attitude and experience in 2017. And then going into 2018, I felt like I was, a foul tip away from being back in the big leagues and then not getting a job, right? And going to the Players Association free agent camp, Wash, you were there too, right? Were you at the?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that experience, right? Like an alt side, that's very similar to what the alt side experience was, where it's like, where are we getting the motivation from? Because we're playing against ourselves, and it's just kind of the same thing every day, and there's not really a light at the end of the tunnel until you get a call from an organization. And I remember, I was looking at other job opportunities as far as interviews and things go, and kind of had to take a deep look in and say, okay, I put all this work in. I felt like I was this close the year before. And then getting the call and deciding to go to Long Island. I think for any person that has played in the major leagues to go there, Wash, you can relate, there's a transitional period, but the guys, it's the same thing as the guys who get sent down from AAA or from the big leagues to AAA. If you don't make the adjustments, you're going to be out of the game. And as I settled into Long Island and stopped telling myself after every ground out to second base, which was a lot early in the season, that I just might as well retire and go home, and then put the ego aside and say, you know what, there's 25, 28 guys here. They're good dudes. We have fun every day when we come to the clubhouse. There's a lot of things about indie ball that are better than affiliated baseball, in my opinion, because there's less politics, there's less there's less strings being pulled, right? So it's really just, this is the guys we got. We're going to go out there and play hard, and we're going to play to win. And I think once I bought into that, and to be honest, it wasn't immediately, but as I spent more time in the clubhouse with the guys and kind of settled into what I like to do as a player, it became one of the better life experiences that I'll ever have. And playing with the Bennett Perrys and the Jake Fishers and the guys that, hadn't had that opportunity to go and
don't
and
put
do
us in
what
the
I've been
same.
able to
Don't
do.
put us in the same category.
But no, I mean, even having a guy like K-Rod there, and kind of his transition in, we all remember it was a little rough at first, and then he settled in and was like, dude, this guy's got 15 years in the big leagues, and he comes to work every day, right? And he's open to conversation. He's here to help guys get better, and I think for any veteran guy, when you can tune into not just like yourself, your batting average, your stat line, and I want to get picked up. This is the whole reason we're all still playing the games. We want to get picked up and go back to the big leagues. But being where your feet are, right, is a cliche that I've heard a lot since I played for Clint Hurdle. And I think that's something that I will constantly come back to no matter where I'm at and what my batting average is usually when I'm struggling, I'm worried about things that are outside of my control. And baseball has been a tremendous teacher to me that no matter what life is going to bring, or your baseball career, or your health, or your family, or whatever it is, there are things that you cannot control. But if you are able to maintain a mindset and a perspective every day, which is a challenge for every human being, no matter what sport or what profession you're in, to be able to learn more about yourself, to find ways to grow and develop as a human being and try and be a better version of yourself, I think ultimately is what we're all trying to do as athletes. And I think as human beings, going back to what you said about LeBron and, the shut up and dribble, it's like, is he a politician? No. Is he somebody that everybody's going to agree with? No, but he's somebody that's experienced life on a different level, not a better level because he is LeBron, but because he's experienced social injustice, or he's experienced racism, or he's experienced the things that come with being a professional athlete. There are, again, that's another lens, it's another perspective that if more of us could just shut up and listen, right? Shut up and dribble, why don't you shut up and listen? Because I think that not every athlete is a smart person. Not every athlete is a good person. But there are things that every human being brings to the table. And for me, I've just tried to focus more on being a better version of that, whether you're in indie ball, you're in the big leagues, or you're in AAA, or you're at home being a dad of three like I am.
Dude, this was kind of just something I put together in my head, like as you were talking. I remember our time, like back in Long Island, and I remember it was kind of not necessarily a switch, but I just remember all of a sudden you would get your work in as you always would, get your routine done in the cage, and then you would spend like a considerable amount of time just kind of hanging out in the cage, talking to other guys. I remember you talked to me a lot, trying to help me figure out some stuff, and I feel like that kind of coincided with like around when you started turning things around. You had kind of a slow start to the year,
Yep.
and then kind of started doing more Travis Snider things, and I feel like those kind of coincided, and I feel like I've kind of had a similar experience here in Milwaukee where a little bit of a slow start, or just didn't feel how I wanted to feel. Had one of my famous blow-ups in the dugout.
Love that.
Yeah, and then just after talking to the manager and the hitting coach, kind of reset my thinking to like, no, I need to focus more on being an influence for the younger guys and like helping them out, and that's how I can contribute more than my actual performance. Like that's great, but the influence is way more important. And like since then, good day or bad day, have been a lot better, and the numbers just kind of started to show up randomly. And I don't know, seeing that almost full circle is pretty wild. How like in the moment when you're looking for something, it seems like it's in the all the mechanics and stuff, but usually it's just from stepping back and trying to be a better person overall.
Yeah, I think, and I'm experiencing this again at 33, right, in AAA, where I've had a pretty solid career throughout the years that I've been doing it. And I've been in a position here where, Wash, we talked about it a lot, is defining your process and your routine and what you're trying to work on every single day, and being consistent about that mindset is something that I have not done a very good job of over the last couple of weeks. And if you look at my numbers, it will show you that. To me, what I'm experiencing this year has been a little bit different than what I've gone through in the past. Having our third baby, families here, the adjustments that come with being a dad in the morning and showing up to the field with the energy that you need to bring every day to be the best version of yourself, and also be able to be a positive influence on your teammates. And I think you hit something that I feel is important. If we're always so focused on ourselves, right, we get consumed by the things that we start finding issues that aren't there, or creating things that are not even on the spectrum of what's going on. And I had a moment, a couple of days ago where I just sat down and I actually broke down exactly what it was I wanted to focus on. And yesterday I didn't play in the game, but was able to go and execute everything that I wanted to execute and feel like I made progress, right, to what I need to be focused on. And in doing that, you find opportunities, whether it's standing in on a bullpen or watching a guy hitting in the cage or whatever, where it's like, hey, you realize that we're all humans and we all have these thoughts, we all have these emotions, and being able to get past those and tune in on a much more energetic level and understand the energy that you're projecting around you, whether it's you or the guy that you're watching, and being able to tap into that when the opportunity presents itself to say, hey, have you ever thought about it this way? Or, you and I talk about a lot, it's like always trying to change something in your swing, when a lot of times you need to be locked in on your routine and just doing your stuff better, right? The routine within the routine. I think that's something we all as athletes lose sight of because we are humans and we have storylines that we're trying to live up to, or we have these expectations from ourselves internally or externally because we go on Twitter or we read, articles about ourselves or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of different ways that we create traps mentally and emotionally that I think I'm still continuing to learn this. And it's part of the reason why I love baseball and I hate baseball, right? It's because it's like you can feel like you got the whole world figured out, and then the next season, or COVID, and then the next season you're like, okay, I'm kind of back to square one with where I'm at. But that's also, for me, the beauty of all this, right, is we all find a time during the season to struggle, and we all have different ways of dealing with those struggles, whether it's I'm going to work harder, I'm going to take 300 swings in the cage every day and use all my energy here because I feel like that's what's going to tell my ego, yes, you're doing the right thing. And so no, maybe I just need to take 50 swings with like a higher level of focus and pour the energy into those 50 swings and make sure that I have enough left in the tank to go out there and compete and separate the work from the play. And I still enjoy that. I don't know on what level of coaching I'll be involved in when I'm done playing, but it's something as I've progressed throughout my career, I've enjoyed more and more of those conversations like we're talking about, whether it's in the cage or in the dugout during a game when you're both not playing, or just hanging out in the clubhouse before or after the game and just talking through the different traps that we just set as human beings for ourselves. And I think it's one of the greater satisfactions that we can have, and it's selfish in a sense, but when you can help the people around you be better while you're getting better, I think is the ultimate goal for me.
Yeah, I love that. There's been a couple guys I've been trying to, get in their ear, while I'm not playing, and, and when, like, one example, we have a guy, Trey, who's kind of, he's figuring some stuff out, and we would, like, talk about his approach, like, maybe, like, 3 batters before he would go up there, and, like, the times where like we've talked about it and then watching him go up there and execute it well is like it's I don't want to like compare it to the feeling of actually hitting, but it's around there. Like it's really, really fun to do.
Yeah, and even as a pitcher, Benny, you can relate, man. It's like you have the process and you have the things you think that make you a great pitcher, but at the end of the day, when you step on the mound, you got to execute, right? And that is the same thing for us as hitters. If we're worried about our mechanics or we're worried about not throwing a pitch here or not swinging at a pitch in the dirt or not striking out, you start getting all the negative stuff of what you don't want to do instead of setting your intentions and going out there with conviction and executing a plan. And when you don't execute that plan, how you evaluate it. I think I look back at the last couple of weeks as I've kind of struggled to maintain some level of consistency is because, again, like you said, Wash, it's not always mechanics. Now, there is a time and place where you need to sit down and watch your swing when you're right and where you're at now and say, okay, these are the differences I see, and then have the resources, which, after as long as we've played now, there's a lot more drills and things, notes and keys that you can tune back into and be like, okay, if I'm lunging, this is a thought that helps me get out of it. But understanding where that has to take place, and then when you step in the box or you step on the mound, all that goes out the window. And then it becomes, okay, what is my approach? And what pitches am I swinging at? Or then as a pitcher, where am I missing? You know what I mean? Like if I'm not executing this pitch, it's setting me up to be 1-0 or 2-0 or 3-1, and I'm getting mollywopped even if I throw 95. And we see that a lot at this level, right? With uber prospects that are tremendous pitchers and have, all the stuff in the world, and same with the hitters, all the talent and all the tools. But it's something I guess I'm very familiar with since very, very early stages of my career, despite being a big prospect and getting to the big leagues at a young age. It's something I've continually struggled with throughout my career. So I hold that close to my heart and try and find the opportunities, like you said, to have a meaningful conversation with somebody. Not just so my ego can feel good to say, I helped that guy, go out and hit 2 home runs tonight or whatever. Right. But it's like helping them figure out their process, helping them settle and set their intentions on what exactly they're trying to accomplish every day. And then, as you guys know, the grind of the season, man, showing up every day and doing the same thing over and over and over. There's a monotony to it, but that's the discipline, I think, and the consistency that the great players have, that guys that, like myself who have struggled, and most human beings, whether it's in baseball or in life, like there's a level of consistency where if you just do a small set of tasks every single day and you do those tasks very well, you're going to be so much more successful than thinking you have to go out and rewrite the book and create this whole new way of doing things. And I think we see a lot of that in the world and in our sport today is trying to reinvent the wheel with all this craziness of analytics and technology and data, and all that has a time and a place, but everybody's personality is different. Everybody responds to things differently. So I think that's something, as you're alluding to, being kind of a coach when you're on the bench right now, how do you connect with players that have the different personalities and come from the different backgrounds and don't maybe speak the same language of hitting, not just Spanish and English, but I like to refer, and we talk about it, what makes sense to David Washington might not make sense to Travis Snider. But at the same time, right, if I can look through it in your eyes, or you tell me something, I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. But then I look at it from a different perspective. I'm like, okay, this is the way I think about this. This is the way he thinks about this. But where is the common ground to be able to say, this drill could help me, or this thought could help me? And I think that's the ultimate struggle that we all go through. But also, it's a beautiful thing, man. When you break through that struggle, you snap that bat, you pull up the dugout, and then you just get that sense of release, right? And then it's like, okay, now I can just clear the mechanism and get after what I need to focus on instead of just carrying the emotion in every at-bat.
This may come as a shock to you, but I am in favor of a good old-fashioned blow-up in the dugout. I think it is a healthy thing, and it just kind of resets you. I think...
Yeah, we talked about that, I feel like, at length, but like it's more about like what you do after.
Right.
Like a blow up is great if it resets you and gets you in a good frame of mind to compete. What I've experienced and seen a lot is where guys don't reset and they just blow up time and time and time again.
That's a good point.
And it becomes a snowball.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that as somebody who snapped a lot of bats, broke a lot of helmets, and destroyed a few towel dispensers in my career, early in my career, I started to understand how that helped me and how that hurt me. And I think what you're saying, Bennett, as far as a good old-fashioned snap is healthy. And I think for all of us, we got to find some release. Hopefully it's in a safe, relatively safe manner where we're not going to injure ourselves punching a bench or whatever, hitting a wall with a bat that doesn't break. And I think that the ability to get that release and then say, you know what, I'm done feeling sorry for myself and I'm done making excuses. Because there's a lot of things we as human beings want to point to as the reason, right, for our struggle, for our lack of success. And I always find myself back in the same spot after, a period of not doing things the way I know I should be doing them. And I start to look at the excuses and the crutches and the reasons I convince myself and my ego as to why I'm not performing. And it's like, none of that matters if you are just focused on your process of getting better every day and not allowing where you hit in the order or how much playing time you're getting, or if you're facing lefties or righties, or if you're, a starter or reliever, or if you're, what I mean? Like, there are adjustments and mindsets to different roles that you play on a team, but ultimately being able to honestly evaluate your at-bats or your outing at the end of the day and say, I need to do this better, and focus on doing that better, instead of saying, oh, well, I got a lot going on at home and I'm not getting a lot of sleep. And, I've been guilty of this several times in my career where I look for answers outside of what it really is. And it's like, hey, your mindset sucks. You show up to the park, you feel sorry for yourself, you make excuses, you walk around with your shoulders slumped over and your energy's horse shit, and that projects. And I think that I've experienced that over the last couple of weeks, and I try and hold myself to a higher standard. But as a human being, I still fall into those traps. And I think young guys, especially that haven't experienced that struggle, it's even harder because they don't know kind of where to go from that point. And again, I think that's can be a huge propeller into the next level of thinking and ultimately human development that we're all looking for, because we only get to play baseball for so long. And after it's all said and done, we're going to get a real job, whether that's riding the bus podcast or going to work for a corporation or whatever, right? Like, you guys are creating something from nothing. And the only way you guys are going to be successful or have fun or whatever your definition of success is actually having a process and executing that process, and not feeling bad if you only have 4 people watch the podcast or you got 400,000, right? And I think that's what, outside of baseball, I've tried to tune into as many podcasts and books that not just athletes, but like people in business, right? High-level performing CEOs, COOs, people that run Fortune 500 companies, and you listen to them speak about their experiences and how they've reached this level of success. And then when you break down what that success is, like, you could be the most successful business person in the world, be a billionaire, and be fucking miserable, right? And I think that that's something that goes overlooked too, is there's a lot of guys in the big leagues that are fucking miserable. There's a lot of guys that are playing in AAA that are miserable. And we've all felt that way from time to time, but it's the guys that get sucked into that and can't fight their way out of it and find that mindset shift that they need, ultimately is going to make for a tough life, right? And no matter what the world brings at you, if you have you have the tools, you have the support group, you have the people in your life that care about you, ultimately that's the most important thing for me as I get older, is the next 40 or 50 years, 60 years of my life, just continue to grow as a human being and use baseball as a vehicle, right, that is going to teach me more about myself than most jobs or most experiences people will go through in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's great. Really quick, I wanted to go back to something, because I thought Travis you guys were both talking, I thought you made a great point when you were talking about, talking to people and trying to help them, and he had made the point, listen, the way David Washington sees it, it's not always the way Travis Snider is going to see it, but you can maybe pick up something here or there, or like that people don't really understand. There's not like a limit of how much knowledge you can attain, and that trying to get as much of it as possible. And sometimes, and it just made me think of when you're saying that, I was going to give a quick little thing of, I remember when I was with the Orioles, we had our pitching coordinator Rick Peterson, who I didn't really like very much. I didn't hide that very much. 99% of the stuff he said and he did I disagree with. But there's like a couple things that I picked up from him that really helped me. And like understanding is that like you can disagree with someone, you can, you know, see it differently, but when you're having those conversations as a hitter in the cage, you're having, okay, that's not how I see it, but that one thing he said maybe I'll take with me, and that really helps me. From a pitcher you're throwing, I'm like, yeah, that's not how I attack hitters, but God, that one thing he said about the curveball, yeah, I'm gonna, you know, I like that or whatnot. I'm being able to pick up little things from here, but you have to be open to that and like how important that is. And so when you were saying that, I thought that was a really good point. That, you know, we kind of moved on, but I wanted to go back to it a little bit just because I thought it was really important, and for anyone listening, just how important that is. So I just wanted to say that.
Sorry, I was gonna
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's been so many times by now where like I've come full circle on some information that I was given, you know, years and years ago, where like, you know, somebody will say something and I, you know, doesn't really resonate or whatever. And then I continue along, you know, trying to figure myself out as a hitter. And five years later, like I come to this realization and I go, that's exactly what I was told in 2014.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't I just understand that? But sometimes that's what it takes. And like, I think that's a good point as far as like, you want to hear, or you want to learn how to filter things that make sense and like that help you along your way in the moment, but you still want to hear like different perspectives and different information, because you don't know like how you're going to feel years from now, and it might make a lot more sense, you know, then than it does now.
Right.
Yeah, I think the culture of a team, coaches and players included, the culture of an organization. I've been with 7 or 8 organizations now, and I know you've been around too, Wash. And it's interesting for me to see what things are prioritized within the culture of an organization and in a team, and how those can directly or indirectly affect player success. And again, there's no excuse for having a bad season because an organization might put an emphasis on shaving your face a certain way, or a collared shirt, or pants up, or a lot of things that we've all experienced at some time in our career. We're like, how the fuck is this going to make me a better baseball player? But with that being said, I think within each organization, there is a genuine interest in trying to make people better. And I think some organizations are tuned into things that others are not. I know a lot
That's
of
a great point.
The analytical stuff that has led to the success of some organizations that were pretty bad organizations 5 or 10 years ago. A lot of that stuff gets put on the forefront and publicized and talked about in the media. And we're kind of seeing that come full circle with some of the sticky stuff and some of the things that's been going on in baseball. But I really think that ultimately when I'm done playing and as I continue to play is trying to create a culture where guys understand it's okay to be vulnerable. You have to learn more about yourself. You have to learn more about your ego and why in 2014 you didn't want to listen to that advice that is clicking for you 5 or 6 years later. And utilizing that opportunity to say, okay, the next conversation I have, whether I agree with what David's telling me or not about my swing or my approach or whatever it is, I don't have to take every piece of information and be like, this is what I'm going to do. Because if you're not convicted and you don't believe it, then that's one thing. But at least being able to say what you said, Bennett, about, you know, this guy taught me something about my curveball that's helped lead to me having success as a pitcher in the future of my career. And I think back to the things I went through in Toronto as a young player and sitting on the bench and talking with Cito Gaston about my approach, and it just pissed me off at the time because I'm like, I'm here because I can hit, like just let me hit. And then as I look back 3 and 5 and 7 and 10 years later, I'm like, shit, what he was trying to tell me wasn't wrong. It's just the way he was saying it and the way my ego was defending myself, being like, nope, I know how to do this. I'm going to figure it out. I don't need anybody's help. It's a constant give and take, and I think a balance that we as human beings, the more self-awareness we have, the better, so that when you get into a situation where you're talking to a coach who maybe has a bigger ego and wants to take credit for your success and wants you to do things one way or the highway, being able to navigate those conversations without getting offended, right, and then putting that wall up where it's like, nobody is coming in my space, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I think there are times where you have to lock into yourself and what you need to do, but there is so much good information out there, and being able to pick the pieces that click for you and try and be willing to try maybe some things that don't seem like they make any sense at the time, or at least look at it through a different lens, will give you an opportunity to grow as a person and understand the struggles you're going through, every human being goes through, and that we're all not very special at the end of the day when it comes to those things. Is like, this is just human nature and things that we're going to battle for the rest of our lives.
Right.
That's a great point. Great point. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I got nothing. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I know we're gonna end this soon here, but I did want to ask one more thing. It made me think of it when we were talking about our time in Long Island, and you had brought up K-Rod, and I was thinking about that experience of, I was like, I remember driving up to watch the Angels play with like the Thunder Sticks when K-Rod came out, and being a fan, and like now I'm like, hey man, I need a catch partner. You want to play catch with me? And it's like, you're K-Rod, like I'm a fan, and I think I could speak for David because we talk about this, but like neither of us are, or I'll just speak for myself. I'm not a big like starstruck kind of guy, especially when guys I played with, because it's like, whether it's delusional or not, I was like, no, I'm on the same level, or I'm gonna be there type of thing. But there was a couple moments where you play. I know David's talked about when he was around Adam Wainwright for a little bit, and like Yachty and these guys who are these unbelievable little players. And I was just going to ask you, in your experience of being called up, did you have any of that where you're like, holy shit, I'm playing with this guy, or I'm facing this guy, or something like that when you first got called up?
Yeah, I mean, Roy Halladay, rest in peace.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude was an absolute savage, and I didn't grow up knowing who Roy Halladay really was, but like Wainwright, right? You get in the organization, and that's the guy. And you get to big league camp, and you're like, all right, don't talk to Roy, don't look at Roy. If Roy talks to you, talk to him. Watch the dude work. Shut your mouth, listen, and watch the dude work. And you're going to see a next level of commitment, discipline, and just grit. And I think he was a guy. Vernon Wells was a great influence on me early in my career as somebody who, had been an all-star and $100 million contract and all these cool things, right, that you think about as a baseball player. And Scott Rowland, another guy we were talking about today at breakfast, the advice he gave me on my debut was to go out there and enjoy it no matter what, because you only get one. And that I use that to the day. Anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody, text somebody when they get called up, remind them it's the same game, and enjoy every minute that you get, because no matter if you're a 15-year vet or a guy who gets a cup of coffee, or even not, even just getting to play overseas and do things that people we grew up with would kill, to be able to go out and do that. And we get so consumed in our egos and our stat lines and our storylines that we forget to operate from a place of gratitude. And that's something I come back to as well, is just understanding how lucky we are, just as human beings in general, with a lot of the things that we've been afforded in our lives, whether that's money, fame, which I think are two very overrated things, but the experiences, right? To me, life is about the experiences now, and not just trying to be the guy who has the most followers on Twitter or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, it's easy to get caught up in the things that don't really matter. And I think being around some of the superstars, Andrew McCutchen was another guy. When I got traded to Pittsburgh, it was like, this dude is the greatest hitter on the planet. And then saw kind of his career trajectory over the next 6 or 7 years, and I was reading a stat that he was like the only 30-something-year-old guy, or one of the only 30-something-year-old guys that's actually starting in the outfield for any team. And you're just like, holy shit, like that's pretty fucking cool. And I got to share a clubhouse with that guy and call him a friend, So like the little things like that, I think. Yeah, I couldn't. Don't quote me, right? But there was something I read on some random site or whatever where it was like, yeah, he's one of maybe 2 or 3 guys that's over 30 years old that's still starting in the big leagues. And thinking back to when I was coming up, Kutch was a year older than me, and I ended up getting in the big leagues the same year as him, and like his career trajectory was much different than mine from that time on. But seeing the guys that are able to grind through the injuries that he has and overcome some of the challenges in bad years, and and even the other guys that aren't those first-round pick top prospect guys that go on to have tremendous careers in the big leagues that nobody would have, realized. Like Jeff McNeil is a guy that I talk about a lot because playing with him in Vegas in 17, he wasn't a prospect, wasn't really a guy that you heard a lot of hype around, and then 2 years later he's playing in the All-Star game, and you're just like, that's one of the coolest things for me is seeing not only the superstars that you play with, but also the guys that you played with in the minor leagues that surprise everybody and outwork everybody and find their way in the big leagues and playing in all-star games, and hopefully he has a tremendous career and plays for a long time.
Yeah. You brought up Vernon Wells. I would always, when I would watch, I would think of, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but he seemed like the perfect vet mentor to me. Like I never met the guy, but just like watching him play, he seemed like the kind of guy that would be a good guy to kind of be under his wing a little bit.
He had fun, man. Kutch was like this too, but I mean, they played so loose, and I'll never forget Vernon caught a ball in center field in Toronto, and made sure to keep 2 feet in bounds to secure the catch before the warning track. And this isn't a major league game, and I'm playing left field. I'm like, I'm worried about hitting the cutoff man and making sure I throw the ball to the right base, and this dude's just out here gliding and pulling in a touchdown pass, and I'm like, okay, there's another layer to this that I think, again, we go back to the struggles and we go back to the egos, and there's a level of fun that you have to be able to maintain, and it's not always going to be fun, but even when things aren't going well, being able to smile and laugh at yourself. And I think that's something on this team now. We have a lot of guys that we talk a lot of shit, and if you fuck up, we're going to let you know, but in a way where it's loving and supporting, but we're also going to say, you drop the ball, how you hold that. Like, come on, you're better than that, So there's always stories from every team, every organization, but I mean, I'm lucky to continue to play this game, and for how long, I don't know.
We talked about the Gwinnett Stripers before. You're playing for an ex-teammate, correct? Matt Tuiasosopo?
Yeah, we didn't play on the same team together, but we played against each other all the way coming through the minor leagues. He was 2 years older than me, lived 15 minutes away from me, pretty famous, for lack of a better term, family. Dad played in the NFL. Brother was a star quarterback at Washington, and that name, was legendary in the Washington area. So as Tui and I got drafted, and he was with the Mariners and still living in Washington, we spent an off season working out together, hitting together, and developed a strong bond at that time that we maintained playing against each other at every stop. I was in left field when he hit his first home run in the big leagues in Toronto, and I was there.
Nice.
The last season in 2018 when he was playing for the Bees up there in New Britain, and kind of coming full circle with that has been really cool, seeing somebody who has a pedigree to be a major league coach. He has the feel and just the presence that you hope for, especially at this level in AAA, where he gets it, and being able to share a clubhouse as player and coach has been a lot of fun for us.
Is there any times you want to talk to him like he was a player, and then you remember, oh yeah, he's the skip?
I think,
or does that not really exist?
I think with his personality, I mean, there's a level of respect, right? You got to show the manager, but we have a mutual respect for each other. Where if there's something that needs to be said, we can say it, and I think timing is important, right? But he's one of those guys that he's there to work, he's there to get better as a coach, but he's not far removed, right, from the struggle of being a player, from the grind of the everyday deal. And with him and the rest of our coaching staff, we have a pretty special group here that makes it a lot of fun. And if you look at our roster, we got a lot of salty veteran guys here that really enjoy showing up at the park every day playing for Tui and the rest of the staff, because they understand the grind, they understand how hard the game is, but they also understand that we got to have fun and hopefully win more ball games than we lose.
Matt Tuiasosopo holds an impressive title that he might not even know about, but he hits Bennett Perry harder than anyone that I've ever seen.
That's funny. I had forgot about that. Yeah, he crushed the ball against me.
Not only does he crush the ball against me, but just every pitch he was on. If it was ball, spit on, it was just more than any. So, maybe you could tell that maybe he probably obviously doesn't even know that. But when I hear that name, I go, God, I don't want to face that guy.
God, I don't have to face that guy. Yeah, we were laughing yesterday in the dugout. We were talking about a home run he hit in Durham one of his last years in affiliated ball that went over the bowl. And you know what I mean? It's like getting a chance to still have, swap the war stories from back in the day when we were playing against each other and shit, just even shooting pool at a shitty bar in New Britain, Connecticut after a Bees-Ducks rivalry game. Me, him, and Reed Brignac just being able to sit there and have a couple of beers and laugh about where the game has taken us, right? And both those guys are now managing in different organizations.
Talk about that lefty that he crushed.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun to see guys transition in the next phase of their careers, and I know mine will be sooner than later, but at the same time, getting a chance to play for him has been a real special thing.
That would be kind of weird, though. Like to play for a guy who's not a manager, who's like a friend of yours that like you either play with. Like if David was a manager of a team I was playing for, like that would be. I don't know. I could see how that would be a little weird,
Yeah, I think of all the personalities, though, he's the right guy.
Okay.
He keeps it loose, keeps it fun. If I really have something to say or I see something, I can go up to him and talk to him man to man, and it's not ego versus ego, right? It's like, hey, you can learn from me, I can learn from you, whether you're my coach or and I've been fortunate to have some really good managers the last 5 years of my career, where even the older guys being able to sit down and just have a conversation in their office, or they can pull you aside and say, hey, I've seen you play a lot, or whatever. It's a special bond that we have, and again, just trying to enjoy each and every day that you have a chance to show up in the field and play for somebody like that.
It's awesome.
Yeah, well, I know we're probably running up against some time for you, so I think we should probably.
If you got any last questions, fire away.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's a good spot to end it.
All right.
Yeah.
Just want to say appreciate you coming on.
Right.
I realized I cut off David midway through that. There's a little bit of delay. But I appreciate you coming on, Travis. That was awesome. Dropped a lot of knowledge. Kind of took a remembering our times playing together and all that kind of stuff. But I really appreciate you coming on, and best of luck the rest of the season. That's all I got.
Yeah, I was gonna say chop wood, carry water till it's wine, right?
Absolutely, man. And you
I don't know what that means.
The same. It means just keep hammering the routine at a higher level, and the wine will come. Chopping wood, carrying water are very simple things, right? We like to overcomplicate things. I think for me,
yes, you do.
Yes,
you do.
Watching you guys, transitioning. Not that you guys are done playing or you are done playing, but just best of luck to you guys on this journey, and just continue to get better every day, every podcast, right?
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right.